Frostbite by Maiden of Asgard. This isn't right. It feels like there are ice shards in your lungs. You're pretty sure you're about to die. You texted your friend basically the same thing earlier that day, jokingly, why on earth would you ever decide to vacation in Reykjavik in November? But now, you realize that you hadn't even known the true meaning of cold. Iceland was cold. Iceland in November was even colder. Unfortunately, this place doesn't seem to be Iceland. In fact, you're relatively certain that this isn't even Earth. With your arms wrapped tightly around your chest in a vain attempt to maintain your body heat, you try to stagger forward through the snowdrifts, vision obscured by the ice pelting down from the gray and stormy sky. It feels as if your limbs are lead, heavy and stiff in pain from the effort. It's a good thing that you were wearing your heaviest coat at least. Best to appreciate life's small mercies. Though, really, you have a pretty big bone to pick with life at the moment, because you had been minding your own business, heading to the local bakery for coffee and something sweet for breakfast, when some freakish glowing circle opened up in the middle of the crosswalk and dropped you off wherever this was. Maybe you'd been hit by a car or something, and this was your preview of the afterlife. If that is the case, your afterlife isn't looking to be very promising. Maybe you should have been a little more altruistic. Hell hath frozen over. Because this definitely isn't Iceland. Bluish-gray rocks spike up from the thick blanket of snow that stretches as far as you can see, which, admittedly, isn't very far. There's some kind of massive outcropping not far from you, and you head towards it. It isn't like you have any idea where else to go. Teeth rattling together, you hunch your shoulders, trying to tuck your head down as much as possible to shield your chin and neck with your scarf. If only you had a thicker scarf, or maybe even 5 or more layers of coats, but the bakery wasn't that far from your hotel, and you hadn't expected to be out in the weather for very long. Clearly, that had been a terrible mistake. There appears to be some sort of cave in the side of one of the rocks, and you beeline towards it as quickly as you are able, because your eyelashes are starting to freeze and slightly stick together every time you blink, and you're pretty sure they aren't supposed to do that. You always liked reading adventure stories, and you know what hypothermia can do to a human body. It won't be pretty. And frostbite? Well, you like your fingers and toes right where they are, thank you very much. Briefly, your mind flits to The Empire Strikes Back, one of your all-time favorites, and you'd always been so grossed out by the little tauntaun survival hack on Hoth. But now, you totally get it. You make it to the cave, just barely, and scramble inside. It isn't very wide, but there is plenty room to stand, and it luckily seems to extend fairly far back into the rock. That's a good thing. It'll get you further away from the wind. And maybe closer to some kind of creepy cave-dwelling monster, your mind whispers. You tell your mind to shut up. It isn't like you have any other options. The cave bottlenecks after a point, and there was a long, dark tunnel leading to somewhere that you'd rather not think about too much. Because if you do, you're probably going to have a panic attack. Crap. Maybe you're already having a panic attack. At this point, you're really too numb to tell. There's a little crevice tucked along the back wall of the cave, and you curl up inside it in a tight ball, utterly clueless as to what else you can do. Help has to come, right? You definitely can't go back out there. Hell, even in here, hidden away from the brutal elements, you aren't sure how long you're going to be able to make it. You should have just stayed in bed and skipped your morning coffee. Caffeine addiction, kids. It kills. You blink slowly, wishing that you had night vision, because the cave is dark, and you'd have to pull your hands out from where they were tucked under your arms and remove your gloves if you wanted to try to use your phone. It might not even work anymore anyway. Did technology have a freezing point? So, you think, oddly giddy despite being in such a dire situation. I guess when I say I'd rather die than go back to work, I really must have meant it. Curling up even more tightly, you try to reduce your surface area. That's a survival trick, right? Your heartbeat is beginning to slow down a bit, and you aren't entirely certain if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Probably a bad thing. In fact, it's probably best to assume at this point that everything is a bad thing. Before long, or maybe it's been a while because you can't really tell anymore, your eyes start to drift closed. Bad. Open them! But resting feels nice, and so you don't try to resist. The tiny warning bells in the back of your head drowned out by a warm, fuzzy glow. Your head falls against your chest. A little rest can't hurt, can it? A sharp crackling snaps you back to reality, and you force your eyes open, though you're far too exhausted to actually move. You blink, and then you blink again. And then, you scream. Because there's a tall blue man with glowing red eyes standing just inside the entrance of the cave, illuminated by a light that is apparently just hovering over his open palm. There's a dark stain across his chest. It's blood, you realize, and you scream again, despite the sting of the icy, dry air in your throat. In his defense, he looks just as horrified as you feel, and then the expression turns to fury, and as he staggers over to where you cower in your crevice, a knife appears in his other hand. Out of nowhere. Like magic. Hallucinations? You wonder, trying to remember if that's a symptom of hypothermia. You hope it is, because otherwise, it looks like some blue guy with a knife is about to stab you, and you really think you'd prefer just freezing to death.
Where did you come from?
He snarls, crouching down and bringing the light to illuminate your face, which is mostly hidden by your hood and your scarf. He doesn't seem particularly happy about it, and you try not to move as the hand holding the knife comes close to your face, too terrified to scream again. The blade comes within an inch of your eye as he yanks your scarf down below your chin, and then he rocks back on his heels, muttering something in a language you've never heard before. It's rough and choppy, and it sounds like he's probably cussing you out. How rude, the delirious part of your brain thinks. You continue to peer at the knife blade, expecting it to come into play at any moment.
All of the realms and all of the creatures in the universe, and I had to be saddled with another Midgardian wench. The Norns must be mad to test me so.
Midgardian wench? It would be really helpful if your voice would cooperate, because you really want to know what that means. Are fantasy novel-style hallucinations really going to compromise your last moments on wherever this place is?
Get up.
The knife disappears as he stands, and when you don't move in the slightest, he glares down at you and seizes you by the collar of your jacket, attempting to haul you to your feet. He's strong, and you crash against him as you fly up from the ground. Your legs and feet are painfully cold and numb, and hopefully they aren't going to just shatter like broken glass, because that's what it feels like.
Come along, mortal. Quickly. Else I will kill you where you stand.
His voice is impatient now, dangerously so, and his eyes flash. Can't. You croak, eyes wide.
What?
The word drops frigidly from his lips, as if he was someone who does not like to be questioned. In your mind, you tell him that you're just an ordinary, boring data analyst who took an unfortunate vacation, and that some terrible accident has befallen you. You tell him that you're lost and afraid and freezing, and that you're pretty sure you're dying. You tell him that you would move if you could, and beg him to please not to kill you. In reality, all you manage is a strangled whine. Cold.
Pathetic.
He sneers, and you kind of want to tell him that he doesn't look so hot himself, what with the grayish pallor to his blue skin and the crusty frozen blood everywhere. He stoops and hoists you over his shoulder, and your teeth clack and chatter together as the shivering and the fear twist and mingle.
Be thankful that I can make use of you.
Your nose is pressed against the back of his jacket, and he smells like leather, blood, and snow. Ordinarily, you might complain, but at that moment, you aren't feeling particularly choosy. If only he was warmer. The light flickers out. Not that you had a particularly good view of anything besides the slippery, rocky floor anyway, and the man starts off towards the tunnel at the back of the cave, jostling your stiff joints. Who? You ask, voice muffled against his back. You do sound awfully pathetic, so you try again. Who are you?
Loki.
He bites out, and you can feel him stumble a bit. How much blood had this guy lost? You wonder. And how much does he have left to lose?
Loki of Asgard.
Your heart stutters, and your next words are shrill. Loki? New York Loki?
Yes.
Oh no. But this guy doesn't look like the Loki that had been plastered all over the news in the wake of the Battle of New York. For one thing, that Loki wasn't blue. The clothes look similar enough, though. All that leather and metal, just like Thor, the otherworldly Avenger. Maybe that was just how they liked it on Asgard. The blackness of the cave grows deeper the further he goes, and you can only assume that he must be able to see in the dark. You, on the other hand, cannot see in the dark, and the added disorientation as you bump along upside down only adds to your terror. And then, a rushing sound begins to fill your ears, and you only realize that you're on the verge of fainting. You whimper, and a stinging smack on the back of your thigh jolts some degree of awareness back into your system.
Stay awake. If you become too burdensome, I will leave you behind.
Loki, you decide, has a terrible bedside manner. You just hope that wherever you were headed now is better than wherever you were before he showed up out of the blue. Blue. Like his face. Your head swims. He staggers again, and you're distantly aware of something wet and sticky trickling along your cheek and towards your hairline. Wet and sticky and coppery. Blood, you realize, and you nearly gag. Carrying you must have reopened something. Suddenly, Loki comes to a halt, and he drags you off his shoulder and lets you fall to the ground in a graceless heap.
We are stopping here. I cannot go any further until I have healed.
He announces, a bit too late in your opinion, now that you've already collided unexpectedly with the hard rock of the cave floor. The light appears over his palm again, and he leans down and takes hold of your collar, dragging you over to the tunnel wall. There's a small, shallow recess in the stone, and he somehow manages to fold his long frame into it, pulling you in after him. What is happening? Your panicked mind screams, because now you were in his lap, and his arms were wrapped around you. A tingling warmth seems across your skin, and though it isn't nearly enough, it helps. Is it real, or are you imagining it?
You are experiencing the side effects of close proximity to healing Seder.
He informs you, almost as if he can read your mind.
I am not going to waste anything else on you, but should be enough to sustain you. For now.
Great, you think sarcastically. You're a real Prince Charming. But then, because you didn't want to die, you managed to actually whisper, "Thank you." Loki scoffs. In this close proximity, you notice that there are faint patterns tracing across his skin, which is now taking on an almost pinkish hue. Fascinating.
I will be rid of you soon enough. Your aura will help to mask my own as I make my way back to my throne.
Something bitter glitters in his eyes as he says it, and you shudder. Aura? He glances down at you as if he'd almost forgotten you were there.
My presence is very distinct, and I am currently in no state to mask it. A mortal, displaced by the convergence, raises fewer alarms than a dead god. And there are those who will be looking.
Oh. You aren't entirely sure what half of that means, but you think it's probably best not to question it. His hand slides to your neck, pushing aside your scarf, and his lips part as he inhales sharply through his nose.
You are very lucky, mortal, that I found you when I did. This Nilufar would have found your scent in no time.
He inhales again, and his eyes flutter closed, his fingers still stroking your throat.
This form heightens my sense of smell.
he comments idly, and you wonder if maybe he's delirious too.
Interesting.
Yeah, you think, a near hysterical laugh bubbling in your chest as you curl up against him and try to ignore the fact that there's a blue space god guy bleeding all over you on some deadly alien planet. That's definitely the word to describe today. Interesting. Sleep closes in on you before you have a chance to fight it, and you succumb, falling limp in his arms. Something cold and hard slams against your face, and you are jolted into panicked wakefulness. It's the floor of the cave. Loki has dropped you once again like a sack of bricks. You glare up at him with a baleful expression, not that it seems to faze him in the slightest. Ow.
Get up, or I assure you I will do much worse.
Ass, you think, but you scramble to your feet. Arguing with a tall, blue, magical alien man is probably a terrible idea, even if you're pretty sure you're going to die soon anyway. Even though you manage to get to your feet, you stagger as soon as you do, your legs numb and tingling. The unpleasant fuzziness from the night before still clouds your senses. This is bad. This whole situation is very, very bad. You attempt to step, but you stagger, and now you're a little too far gone to second-guess yourself. You grab onto the front of his shirt. It's crusted with dried, frozen blood, which would normally make you gag, but you're already covered in it now, the product of a night spent pressed against his chest. Please, you whine, your dignity abandoned somewhere around the time you realized you were probably dying. Everything hurts.
Really, mortal? Do tell me how painful this is for you.
His expression is sardonic, and he carefully pries your fingers from the fabric of his shirt, holding you at an arm's length. Yeah, maybe you shouldn't have complained to the guy that appears to have been impaled straight through the chest. But he does seem to be a lot more perky now, which is both incredibly impressive and terrifying, because you don't particularly care to be at the mercy of some maniac who can survive being stabbed clean through.
Perhaps I should have put you out of your misery. It would have been the merciful thing to do.
It's mostly dark in the cave, though Loki's crimson eyes manage to somehow catch a bit of light, just enough to make the whole thing a bit more heart-stoppingly menacing. No, please. You're on the verge of tears.
Oh, do not worry, child. I am not merciful.
Before you have a chance to process the implications of that, you're upended, face once again smashed against the leather of the back of his coat.
We must move, quickly.
He says, and then he starts to move forward, his steps much steadier than before. By the bouncing glow illuminating the cave floor, you assume that he must be using his magic to light his way again, and you are sorely tempted to ask if he might spare some magic to make you warm. Instead, you ask, "Move to where? Please say Earth. Please say Earth."
Utgard.
Your heart plummets. Utgard doesn't sound very promising. Utgard?
The capital of Jotunheim. What's left of it, that is.
Why?
You're horribly nosy, aren't you?
He slaps the back of your thigh again, hard enough that it stings even through your layers, and you wonder if it's meant as an admonishment or as an attempt to keep you conscious. Yes? The nearly inaudible sound he makes at that might be a laugh, but you can't be certain.
I told you already, girl. I am going to claim my throne.
Oh. The buzzing in your head is just as persistent as before, and you realize that, on top of the freezing cold and the blood rushing to your head from the awkward position, you haven't eaten in a while. Does this guy have to eat? You wonder. Surely he does. He's big and strong. Something has to be fueling all that muscle, right? He'll have to stop eventually. Wait. He isn't going to eat you, is he? It sounds kind of crazy, but you aren't exactly exploring familiar territory here. You reassure yourself that he probably isn't going to eat you, not after he went to all the trouble of snuggling you all night to stay warm. Probably. Hopefully. He does seem like kind of a dick, though. And he says he's the same guy who tried to destroy New York City with a brutal alien army, so you probably shouldn't get very comfortable. If you even could manage to get comfortable in the first place. The way he's handling you isn't very gentle. Loki carries you along in silence for a few moments, his rapid strides taking you further and further into the dark, winding tunnels of this place that's apparently called Jotunheim. And after that, your voice is muffled against his back, and you feel your eyelids growing heavy again as warmth slips across your skin. That feels nice.
And after that is none of your business, is it?
There's a terse, mocking sort of pleasantness to his tone, and you close your eyes. Ass, you think again. Not that you care. You just want to sleep. Sleep is nice. It's warm and fuzzy, and you don't have to feel cold anymore, or listen to him.
Girl.
His voice is distant now. Actually, you might be dreaming. That's probably what this all is. Just a bad dream. You don't bother trying to respond.
Mortal.
Your equilibrium spins. This is such a weird dream, you think. Your imagination is being particularly creative, and your hotel bed must suck a lot worse than you remembered, because it's hard and flat and uncomfortable. You try to roll over, but your body doesn't move. There's a faint sound that kind of reminds you of a zipper, and then you feel hands sliding across your skin, pressing into your chest. They're cold, and you grimace. Go away, you slur. You'll be damned if you're going to let Nightmare Loki freeze you. It's a shame you can't move.
Shut up, you stupid wench.
The icy feeling spreads, digging into your heart. A contradictory sort of burning spreads through your veins in its wake. It's incredibly painful, and you're pretty sure dreams aren't supposed to be painful. You force your eyes open just the slightest bit. The world around you narrowed to a tiny, dimly illuminated slit. Red eyes, blue skin, a pissed-off expression. Oh no. You begin to feel a little more alert. Maybe it isn't a dream. You blink slowly as the burning continues to creep through your limbs. Trying to lift your head, you're flat on your back, you realize. And the zipper-like sound that you thought you dreamt up apparently really was a zipper, because your jacket is open and Loki's hands are under your sweater, one placed directly over your heart. He's worryingly close to cupping your breast, as a matter of fact. Hey, you mumble, indignant. He ignores you. You're dangerously close to bursting into tears. Why won't he just let you sleep? You close your eyes again.
Open your mouth.
When you don't make any move to obey, you feel his fingers squeezing into your cheeks, and then something burning and acidic hits your tongue. Spluttering, you glare at him. Whatever he just forced down your throat tastes like nail polish remover smells, and you wonder if he's decided to kill you after all. His hand clamps over your mouth and nose.
Swallow it.
Your eyes sting, and you can't breathe. So as horrific as it is, you have no choice. The burning in your veins eases a little, but the aching remains. Loki removes his hand, wiping it on the front of your sweater as if he's disgusted to have touched you. Feelings mutual, you think, bizarrely offended.
A total waste of resources. You'd better hope Heimdall didn't notice me opening up one of my pockets.
You have no idea what the hell that means. Did you just poison me? Your voice, you're surprised to notice, is a bit stronger, though it's still pretty raspy.
Unfortunately for me, no.
You're still struggling to move, and he yanks down your sweater and re-zips your jacket as he crouches over you. Glancing to the side, you finally find the source of the dim light. There's a luminous ball floating a few feet off the ground. Huh. Your mind is having a difficult time processing all this magical stuff. Loki tugs off his weird leather and metal coat vest thing and hauls you to a seated position by your collar.
Stay,
he says, and you try not to fall back against the rocky cave floor as he wraps the thing around your torso.
Useless.
Apparently not. You want to snap. because clearly he needs you for something. Otherwise, you'd be a popsicle right now. This time, when he lifts you, he cradles you to his chest instead of slinging you over his shoulder. It's a massive improvement, although you don't really know how you feel about having this guy carrying you bridal style into the dark on a weird alien planet. At least you can see where you're going now, and the glowing ball of light illuminates the tunnel as he presses onward, his pace becoming more and more rapid. He's clearly in a hurry. You are too. Whatever he did warmed you up, sure, but this place is clearly not designed to accommodate human physiology, and you just want to go home. You squint up at his face. There was a pattern there when he first showed up, you're almost certain. But now his skin is smooth. Smooth, but still blue. So, does Thor look like this sometimes, too? Based on the fire in his eyes as his gaze snapped down to your face, that might have been a bad thing to ask.
What?
Blue. Does Thor turn blue?
No.
Even through the layers of your jacket and the leather wrapped around you, you feel his grip tighten. You lapse into silence. The more alert you become, the more you remember that you really, really need to be careful with him. He's extremely dangerous, and the broadcasts from the Battle of New York flash across your memory. Extremely dangerous, and he has no regard for human life. Just who you want to have staving off your seemingly inevitable demise. Unfortunately, the fact that you're a little more clear-headed now just makes the awkwardness and the boredom of being carried along in the silence that much more awkward, and you lean your face against his chest. It's not very comfortable, what with all the leather and metal and blood, but you're past caring.
If you fall asleep again, I'm going to hurt you.
What? You squeak. That hardly sounds fair. Especially considering that you've literally nothing else to do.
If you fall asleep, you will very likely not wake up. And that would mean I wasted my efforts for nothing. So remain alert.
Groaning, you turn your head to burrow further against his chest. Loki tenses. Talk then. Tell me the plan. It's bold of you to ask, and you don't expect a response. But after a moment of uncomfortable silence, he speaks.
Jotunheim is mine by birthright. When we reach Utgard, I intend to seize the throne.
Yeah, good luck with that, buddy. You think. Because your new travel partner doesn't look like he's in the condition to do much conquering. He's probably going to get both of you killed. Why do you want this place?
I don't. I want Asgard.
Asgard is a somewhat familiar concept. That's where Thor is supposedly from, right? And Loki too, you thought, since word on the street is that they're related. Why Asgard?
Because it is mine. Mine by legal succession, and it was taken from me.
He looks like he's contemplating murder as he stares ahead down the tunnel. Okay, maybe we should talk about something else. Aren't you cold?
No, I was born in this realm. We will stop and rest once more before we arrive in Utgard. I am still mending my wounds.
You hum in acknowledgement. You wouldn't happen to have food, would you? He sighs in irritation.
No, you'll have to wait until we reach the palace.
Considering he's supposedly the inspiration for the mythical god of lies, he definitely isn't going to be a very good conversational partner. For a while, you simply look up and study his face. Once you get past the strangeness of the different color scheme, you can see the resemblance to the man from the broadcast of New York. There's a sort of smooth sharpness to his features. He definitely has that classical, handsome villain thing down. And his hair is nice. It looks a little crazy right now, but it's still nice. Probably soft. And his mouth is kind of nice, too, when he isn't sneering. Probably gonna die anyway. Might as well enjoy the scenery. Loki gives you a strange look.
What are you doing?
Nothing, you mumble, cheeks crimson.
Could he tell what you've been thinking? No, of course not. He just noticed you staring for too long.
But his face is perplexed now, brow creased in confusion. It's almost endearing, after all the snarls and glares.
Your scent changed,
He says carefully, almost accusatory.
What the hell?
Sorry. If you could die of embarrassment, it would probably be happening right now. Because the objectively handsome weirdo who's probably going to get you killed can apparently smell when you're feeling amorous. I don't know why.
An effect of the potion, perhaps.
But he says it stiffly, like he knows.
He knows.
So, maybe you could elaborate on this little plan of yours? For taking over the planet, I mean. You venture to say. It's been a long trek in awkward, near total silence, and you're about to either go crazy or just fall asleep in his arms. Loki's face remains stoic, but there's a bit of a bite in his tone when he replies.
I know that you are not being sarcastic with me, are you, girl?
No. Maybe a little. Genuinely curious, and trying to stay awake, like you told me to. Please? It's not like I'm gonna run off to sound the alarm. He laughs, a short, startled bark of a laugh that bounces along the icy cave walls.
No, I suppose you won't. Very well. The realm is currently ruled by a queen regent, until the eldest of her 2 sons comes of age. Actually, Helblindi might have come of age while I was lost in the void.
A frown crosses his features.
I don't know what any of this means. You're terrible at explaining things.
Maybe he's doing it on purpose. That seems likely. And you're planning to, assassinate them or something?
If they do not recognize my claim to the throne, then yes.
Your claim?
I am the firstborn son of Laufey, king of Jotunheim. Farbauti's children will stand aside, or I will kill them.
That seems kinda harsh.
Do not pretend that the royal houses are any different on Midgard. I have witnessed thousands of years of murder and bloodshed on your world.
It doesn't mean it's okay, you mumble. But really, you aren't about to argue. He's keeping you alive for now, and that's all you can really bring yourself to care about at the moment.
The Jotnar are giants.
He continues, seemingly unbothered by your judgment. Yeah, well, you're really freaking tall yourself.
Not tall.
He almost sounds amused.
Giant. You'd best be prepared.
You want to ask why he isn't a giant then, but you decide you'd rather not know. You prefer him this way, where he's at least slightly human. Human-ish, at least. Although, it might be nice if he wasn't quite so attractive. It's kind of worrying you, actually. The guy is a murderer, on top of the whole not human thing. You wonder if maybe it's kind of like some sort of survival mechanism, like Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah, that's probably it.
So, how are these giants going to react seeing an earthling showing up uninvited?
I suspect that they would play with you, mortal. Until you died, that is.
Loki's tone is serious, but there's a hint of mischief sparkling in his eyes. It isn't very comforting. Play with me?
No need to worry. If I claim you as my pet, I'm sure you'll be fine. The Jotnar may be savage, but they do respect property rights.
Property? Your voice cracks, and so does Loki's composure. He grins down at you, though it isn't particularly friendly.
Of course, my own little mortal pet. Bit of an antiquated notion, to be sure, but it is an intriguing concept.
If he wasn't keeping you from freezing, you might try to wriggle away in the face of such outrageous claims. Much to your chagrin, however, you find that you'd much rather be a pet than a popsicle.
You look displeased, girl.
Frowning, you avert your eyes, turning to watch the ever-approaching darkness of the tunnel ahead.
I'm a person, not property.
Oh? I think your tune will change rather quickly if I decide to leave you to the elements.
His grip begins to loosen, and you scramble to clutch at his tattered tunic, crying out in alarm. Loki snickers and pulls you back against his chest.
That's what I thought.
Ugh, he's so damn smug. This weirdly upbeat mood he's suddenly in is almost worse than the temper he had been in when he first found you. At least then, you kind of knew what to expect. At the same time, you're feeling weirdly upbeat too. Maybe it's because, while you still aren't feeling particularly great, you definitely no longer feel on the verge of freezing to death. Maybe there was something in that potion thing he gave you to make you calm down. You glare at him, suspicious. What's that even mean? You mumble.
What does what mean?
Being your pet? You want to say, but you think better of it. Nothing. I'm really hungry. And you are. Now that the novelty of simply being alive is beginning to wear off, your empty stomach is making itself known.
I have already told you, it will have to wait. I have nothing with me.
Ugh, this is the worst political coup I've ever been a part of. You grumble, and Loki gives you a strange look.
I do believe that the Asgardian need in that potion might have been a bit strong for you, mortal. You become worryingly bold.
The frown on your face turns to a scowl. Stupid spoiled brat sorcerer prince. But his mention of the potion does remind you of his pockets, and you brighten almost immediately. Hey, that pocket with the potion, got any more of those? With food, maybe?
Those pockets are essentially interdimensional portals, and the amount of power required to open them is difficult to mask.
But you already did it once.
Yes, and now you will not stop talking. Perhaps I should consider muzzling you.
He actually looks like he's considering it, and you fall silent. You aren't about to let yourself get muzzled by some power-tripping weirdo in a cave on an alien planet. A sexy power-tripping weirdo, though. Ugh, stupid, sexy blue man. Loki releases a startled huff. Oops, you might have said that part out loud. Crap! What was in that? You squeak, cheeks heating. Actually, now that you think about it, everything is starting to feel warm.
Nothing harmful,
He replies, and you can practically see the wheels in his head begin to spin.
Nothing that would cause any significant side effects. To an immortal, at least.
What?
It is hardly my fault that you are mortal.
Loki snaps. Your mouth gapes. As if this is my fault?
Hush.
And so you hush. But then, you notice it feels like you're floating through water, and your brain decides that it's imperative that Loki knows this. Hey, you blurt out. I feel like I'm underwater, but also flying. That's kind of weird.
Does hush have a different meaning on Midgard?
Sorry.
I much preferred you half dead. At least then you were quiet.
Rude. You may be a grown woman, but you aren't above pouting. As much as you've been through the last day or so, you figured you've earned it. When you turn your face into his shoulder, you notice that for the first time that underneath the sickly metallic smell of his blood-stained clothes, Loki's scent is actually kind of nice, minty, almost crisp. Do you smell nice? Suddenly you're self-conscious. He apparently has a wickedly strong sense of smell, and even if he is a terrifying former supervillain, you kind of hope he doesn't think you smell like garbage. That would be really embarrassing. Though you keep your eyes open due to Loki's earlier warnings that you'll be in serious trouble if you fall asleep, you allow yourself to drift off into daydreams. Most of them are food-related. When you're back on Earth, you decide you're going to eat a metric ton of fried chicken and mashed potatoes. Or maybe just a cheeseburger. Or 3. Ooh, or a hot cinnamon roll. This really isn't helping with the hunger pains. You want to ask if you'll even be able to eat anything at this palace Loki's apparently planning to take over, considering his medicine has you intoxicated and sweating like a sinner in church. Wait, you're sweating? That doesn't seem right. I'm sweating, you announce.
So I've noticed.
The disdainful curl in his lips makes you cringe, suddenly even more self-conscious than before.
I believe that you are metabolizing the ingredients of the potions differently than intended. It seems you are experiencing something akin to arousal.
You're pretty sure your face turns beet red at that.
Sympathetic nervous system arousal.
He continues, giving you another one of those strange, half-amused looks.
You are having something like what you would call an adrenaline rush. I'm certain that it must feel quite unpleasant, combined with the sedative effects of the potion itself.
Yeah, very unpleasant.
It will pass soon enough. At least, I believe that it will. Consider yourself a test subject.
Oh, great. A lab rat for a mad sorcerer. That's just how you wanted to spend your vacation?
We are stopping here.
You kind of expect him to just drop you onto the cold rock floor again. But instead, Loki gracefully folds himself to the ground, with you still clasped securely in his arms. Impressive. For how long?
Until I feel ready to continue.
Okay, that's fair, you think. He's the only thing keeping you alive, so you prefer for him to stay in good shape. Especially if his next move is going to be taking over a planet. Take your time.
It should be safe enough for you to go to sleep now. In fact, please go to sleep now. I beg of you.
Fine. You suppose that in the grand scheme of things, Loki telling you to shut up isn't that big of a priority at the moment, but it still grates on your nerves. Squeezing your eyes closed, you snuggle closer, thinking about what a weird story this was going to make for the therapist you're undoubtedly going to need once this is all over. You flinch slightly when Loki rests his head against yours, and you hear him inhale deeply through his nose. He's smelling you again. Well, at least that kind of answers the question of whether or not you smell like garbage. Creep? You think. But you're also just the tiniest bit happy. That's weird. You shouldn't be happy that this dangerous, otherworldly nutcase is sniffing your hair in the middle of a dark cave. That's what your brain says, at least. Your body seems to be of the opinion that it's kind of hot. Or maybe that's just the potion. Either way, you're feeling warm and tingly, and some part of you is thrilled at the fact that he's cradling you so carefully in his lap. Ugh, this is pretty messed up. Stockholm Syndrome, or maybe traumatic bonding? It's definitely one of those. You chastise yourself. But that doesn't keep you from releasing a sigh of content when his hand creeps up to pet your hair, and you're sliding into sleep before you have a chance to second guess why that might be.
When you wake up the next morning, or afternoon, or night, because time has begun to lose all meaning in these endless, dimly illuminated tunnels, Loki is already on the move, holding you clasped against his chest once more. That was actually kind of nice of him to let me keep sleeping like that, you muse. Or maybe he just didn't want to deal with your conversation. You feeling better? You ask. You figure you might as well suck up to him as much as possible, because you're really starting to get concerned about the whole no food for days thing, and it's looking like Loki has become your meal ticket for the foreseeable future.
Well enough.
Wonderful. He's in a crappy mood again. So, anything I should know? Maybe some background on this alien race we're about to conquer?
You aren't going to do anything, girl. Keep your head down and stay quiet. I'll do the talking.
Message received. You've noticed that the weird, sorcery-induced sweating has stopped. That's a relief. But you're still feeling pretty giddy, and now you're kind of sticky and uncomfortable too. You'd kill for a nice pair of fuzzy pajamas right now, fresh out of the dryer, and a huge, cuddly blanket. And you'd really like to wash your hair too, because you're pretty sure you look disgusting at this point. You certainly feel gross.
We've almost arrived.
Loki says, and your heart skips. What, already? You're about to meet actual living giants. Giants that Loki wants to fight. You definitely aren't mentally prepared to deal with this yet.
Yes. Keep your hood up. We will be outside again soon, and the wind is biting.
He wasn't lying. The moment you emerge from the tunnel, the wind feels like it's trying to tear you to pieces, whipping at your clothes and stinging your eyes. You close them and turn your face to burrow against Loki's chest, which is starting to become something of a safe haven in this bizarre little adventure of yours. Snuggled up against the hot, dangerous alien god's chest is probably not the best place you want to be when you're feeling scared, but emotionally, that's just where you're at right now. Bonding through trauma. Just wait and work it out in therapy. Because right now, you aren't about to give up anything that makes you feel even a little bit better about this whole nightmare. And it really doesn't seem like Loki minds the clinginess either.
Keep your head down.
He reminds you, and you take that literally. Because when you hear the clanking of metal and the sound of rough voices calling out in a language you don't recognize, you tense and press your nose further into the fabric of his tunic. You wonder if you'll ever manage to escape the smell of ice and blood.
Laufey-san.
That sounds familiar, and as you focus your attention, you find that the beings around you have switched to something you can understand. That's interesting. Fascinating, really. How does that work?
Take me to your queen.
Loki says, his tone dripping with an impressive amount of casual arrogance. If he's as worried as you are, he certainly isn't showing it. You feel him striding forward again, and there are some disgruntled mutterings around you. You make out the word mortal, and your panic spikes up a notch or two, as you remember Loki's warning that the frost giants would be more than happy to do terrible things to you. He drops you to your feet, suddenly and without warning, though he catches you by your forearm to keep you upright. You barely have a moment to catch your bearings before he continues, dragging you through a massive entryway into an enormous room that appears to be made entirely of ice. Now you see your welcoming party for the first time, and it's all you can do to not scream. The beings around you seem to range from about 7 to 10 feet tall, and they're all blue, all crimson-eyed, and all incredibly muscular. Soldiers, you realize. You thought Loki large, but he seems incredibly small in comparison to these brutes, whose reactions to your appearance seem to range from amusement to outrage. At the end of the hall sits a large wooden throne, embedded with chips of reflective glass. Or maybe that's ice too. It would hardly be surprising at this point. On the throne sits a woman, incredibly fearsome, but with a striking sort of beauty about her features. Her hair is sleek and black, and she appears to be wearing a cloak with boots, and not much else. She smiles and your skin crawls. Her velvet lips hide bright white teeth, and her eye teeth appear to be filed into sharp points. Or are they naturally that way? You try to glance around without drawing too much attention to yourself, but it seems like only some of the giants have pointy teeth. Loki certainly doesn't. In fact, Loki also doesn't have pointed ears, but the queen and some of the other giants do, and some of them barely have earlobes at all. Okay, keep that curiosity under control. Keep your head down. You can ask him about it later.
Okay, Laufey-san.
One of the soldiers next to you announces, and there are a few gasps and murmurs from the giants mingling in the hall, particularly those lounging about on the steps leading up to the queen's dais. Ah, and so the lost princeling returns to us once more. Farbauti's smile remains on her face, though none of it manages to reach her eyes, and she glances at the smaller giant at her side. He's only a boy, it looks like, and you're guessing that if he were human, he'd be in his teens. Come to see all the destruction you've wrought on your homeworld firsthand, have you?
Actually,
Loki replies, stepping past the soldiers as if he hadn't a care in the world.
I've come to claim my rightful place, Queen Mother. I am the firstborn of the bloodline of Laufey, and I will have my throne.
Her laugh rings out through the hall, and you curse Loki to hell and back in your mind.
Is this seriously the best he can do? That is true, Laufey-san, but you've no friends here. Do you have anything besides Laufey's blood to recommend you?
Of course. There is my power, which you can feel, Farbuati, and that is why your heart pounds with fear, because you know I could kill your son where he stands.
The murmur of the crowd cranks up a notch. Damn it, Loki. All he's doing is pissing everyone off. So why aren't they attacking?
And there is my sorcery.
Loki continues, smiling pleasantly.
And my knowledge of the workings of the 9 realms. There is the fact that I was raised to be a king, and that I have many powerful allies across the worlds of Yggdrasil. There is also the fact that I can restore to you the casket of ancient winters, and bring Jotunheim to its former glory. I can bring this realm back from this dark age, Farbauti. What say you to that?
She doesn't look particularly happy about any of it, but there is a calculation in her crimson eyes, as if she's carefully weighing her options.
Unless, of course, you wish for one of your sons to challenge and kill me. That is the only way for the rightful king to be ousted from the throne of Jotunheim, is it not?
Farbauti now seems sullen. We will have to consult with the Valva, of course, as with all great matters of state.
You'll forgive me for saying so, Farbauti, but I must wonder at the practicality of your seeress. Surely, if she were that useful, Laufey would still be alive.
Actually, the queen replies, red eyes glittering with some sort of malevolent mirth. The Valva did warn Laufey that he would die at the hand of his son. He, of course, assumed that meant Helblindi or dear little Bilister. She ruffles the hair of the boy at her side, who remains impressively stone-faced. Everyone thought you dead, Loki Laufey-san, the prodigal firstborn. Loki appears unfazed.
Yet he let them live?
Yes, Laufey always did think he could outplay the Norns.
Consult the vulva, then,
Loki says smoothly, though there is an undercurrent of irritation in his tone.
if that is what custom dictates.
Do not sound so sullen. You should be delighted, Princeling. Perhaps she can tell you more about your wretched mother, as she was also a storm giant. At that, Loki's grip suddenly tightens, his fingers digging into your skin so fiercely that you want to cry out in pain, but you bite your lip instead.
What of my mother?
Oh, the boy does not know. Yet another sin of Odin Allfather.
Get on with it, Farbauti. You test my patience.
Gunlad was a petite little thing, she says disdainfully. Most of the coastal tribes tend to be on the smaller side. Harsher climate, I suppose.
And?
There's no holding back your whimper now, because you're starting to feel like Loki might accidentally snap your arm like a twig, but his grip doesn't loosen. And Laufey, in the height of foolish youthfulness, wedded and bedded a little witch with absolutely no standing whatsoever. It was a complete outrage. Oh God, please, lady, stop talking. Loki's on the verge of exploding. You can practically feel the energy humming off of him, and if he loses it, you don't stand a chance. You already probably don't stand much of a chance. He even refused to take any other consorts or concubines, defying our ancient traditions. And do you know why? Farbauti's fingers curl around the ends of her armrests as she leans forward, eager to deliver the next blow. For love. Imagine that, Princeling. It was the seed of that love that destroyed him. Loki actually does a pretty good job of reining himself back in. You suppose thousands of years of being in a royal court must have taught him some manners, even if he never bothers to waste them on you.
If you are quite finished reminiscing over the honored dead, Farbauti, then I would like to be shown to my chambers.
She snorts and leans back in her throne, evidently disappointed by Loki's subdued reaction. Of course, of course. Are you taking that little warm skin with you? Loki almost seems taken aback at the reminder that you're there, despite his vice grip on your arm.
Yes, you know how mortals are. I'd best keep her close at hand.
You're incredibly relieved at that, because no matter how much he absolutely sucks, at least Loki needs you alive. That's more than you can say for the rest of these creatures. Skrymir, the queen calls out to one of the towering brutes at the end of the hall. See to it that the feast hall is prepared so that we may welcome Loki Laufeyson home. Her lip curls around the word rather unpleasantly, and your stomach churns. You really hope Loki knows what he's doing, because you really don't want to get murdered at a giant's feast. It sounds so storybook. It turns out that fairy tales are much more frightening in real life. Skadi, escort our prince to his chambers. One of the women seated at the foot of the throne nods and gracefully rises to her feet. She isn't absurdly tall, though she does stand maybe half a foot over Loki. You feel incredibly tiny and incredibly vulnerable. The giantess brushes long black hair over her shoulder as she leads Loki through the polished hallways, and you're barely able to keep up. In fact, were it not for his bruising grip on your arm, you probably would have fallen onto the icy floor. Laufeyson, she says, and the playfulness in her voice instantly sets you on edge. You mean to take the throne?
The throne is mine for the taking.
Do you suppose the Queen Mother agrees? Skadi's smile is sharp, her white teeth contrasting brightly against her skin.
I trust the Queen Mother will support whatever is best for Jotunheim, which is me taking my rightful place as king.
King Loki, heir of Laufey. The girl seems to mull the title over carefully. Perhaps you will give consideration, future king, to those of us who are loyal to the bloodline. She laughs and tosses her hair again, ushering the two of you into a large room. Well, ushering Loki. She's barely even glanced at you this entire time. The baths are down this hall. There is a stairwell that leads down to the steam pools below the palace. You are welcome to use them at your leisure. Skadi winks. And you will have your women to attend to you, of course, once this whole matter of succession is settled.
Are you so fickle, Skadi, that you will withhold your attentions unless I wear the crown?
I'm sworn to the king of Jotunheim, and you, Loki Laufeyson, are not king yet. She smirks as she turns to leave, her hips swaying in a way that is obviously supposed to be seductive. You're really starting to dislike this chick. Loki waves a hand and the doorway seals shut behind her. It's ice, you realize, a magically formed chunk of solid ice. Great, so that's a no on sneaking out in the middle of the night then. Not that you had anywhere to go anyway. There's an amused sort of smile on his face, and it twists and scratches at your temper. So, he begins snidely, you're gonna try and sleep with Smurfette, huh? He lets out a short bark of laughter.
Consider it a good sign, mortal. If Skadi thought my claim to the throne invalid, she would not try so brazenly to capture my attention.
You snort.
Mind your manners. If you act this way in front of the Jotuna, I will have to discipline you. You do not want to be disciplined, do you?
No.
No, master.
What?
Perhaps you've forgotten my threat to muzzle you if you keep up this horrific shrieking of yours.
Loki says, but you can see that he isn't angry. No, he looks incredibly pleased with himself, now that everything seems to be going according to his plan. If this was according to plan, you're still not entirely certain that he isn't just making it up as he goes along. You decide that it's best not to argue, for the time being at least. Not while you're scared and starving and relying on a worryingly attractive, temperamental alien for survival. Instead, you survey your surroundings. The room you're now in is odd. The outer walls seem to be made of some sort of bluish-gray stone, while the inner walls are a dark, opaque ice. Must make for easier renovating. You congratulate yourself for maintaining some semblance of humor during this whole ordeal. There's a massive bed in the corner. Well, something like a bed at least. It's a platform carved out of stone itself, covered in layer upon layer of blankets, skins, and furs. You've yet to see anything furry on this godforsaken planet, and these humongous pelts aren't exactly good for your nerves. Fantastic. They've probably got some sort of freaky mutant polar bears for pets here. Your reluctant savior takes notice of your gaze, though he misinterprets the reason for your angst.
You are going to be sleeping there, with me. You might as well get used to the idea.
That's great. Now you have something else to freak out about. Somehow the idea of crawling into an actual bed with him seems much more serious than the last few nights of snuggling in the caves to survive. How about I just take the floor?
Mortal, you're going to have much less bravado when the potion finally wears off and the cold truly begins to settle into your bones.
Your heart drops. It's gonna wear off?
Of course. Nothing lasts forever. And even if I do spare some of my power to charm you, you are still going to be very, very uncomfortable here.
Fan-freaking-tastic.
I need you to listen very carefully to me, and heed my words. When we are among the frost giants, speak only when spoken to, and act as demure and obedient as possible. It'll make your time here far more pleasant.
All right, you mumble. Loki stares at you, brows lifted expectantly. I'm not gonna say it.
Master or sire are your options, mortal. Choose your poison.
All right, sire, you snap. At least that one sounds a little less degrading.
Wonderful. You are learning so quickly.
The sarcasm makes you scowl, but you keep your mouth shut. Keep your head down. Survive. That's all that matters. There's a scraping sound as Loki opens the ice door again, and he beckons you forward.
Come along,
He says, a worryingly mischievous smile on his face.
let us bathe.
You keep your mouth shut as Loki marches you down the hall. He's gripping the same part of your upper arm that he nearly crushed during Farbauti's earlier taunting, but you don't dare to mention it, because there are other giants in the hall, and they're all watching you. You're pretty sure he wouldn't care anyway. The boots you were wearing when you set out on your fateful trip to the coffee shop in Reykjavik were thankfully thick-soled, but they clearly weren't designed to handle slick, iced-over stone floors, and you eye the approaching stairwell with increasing apprehension. You're going to end up falling and accidentally breaking your neck, assuming one of these giant blue people doesn't decide to do it for you. Ugh, this place sucks. I mean, it's pretty, but it sucks. Loki releases your arm and takes hold of the back of your collar, practically dragging you down the steps. It looks rough, but he does keep you from taking a tumble, so you figure he's just putting on a show. You can tell that the warm buzz of the potion was starting to wear off, and whatever bravery you felt is quickly fading alongside it. The room he pulls you into has a thick, heavy-looking wooden door, which Loki easily shoves closed. Could you even open that? It's like everything on this planet is designed to make your life miserable, to remind you that you're trapped. Loki begins to take off the armor things on his arms, and you take a moment to take stock of your surroundings. Maybe if you figure out the layout of this place, you can make some sort of plan? Probably not, but it's worth a shot. This room, at least, isn't covered in ice. No, it's stone, shiny and polished, with intricate patterns of parallel, swirling lines carved into the floor and walls. The majority of the floor is taken up by a large, dark pool, and steam is rising gently from the water surface. Light streams from several sconces situated about the room, though they didn't appear to house actual fire, but rather some sort of glowing white orbs. They're surprisingly bright. Maybe too bright, because Loki is stripping off his tunic now, and you have way too clear of a view. What are you doing? You scrunch your face down further under the scarf and the collar of your jacket, hoping to hide your blush.
Strange. I thought modern mortals were familiar with the concept of bathing.
He bares his teeth in a pained grimace as he rips the stained fabric from his skin, dropping it in an unkempt heap on the ground. Damn, his whole upper body is a mess. You can't even tell what kind of shape he's actually in, because there's so much dry blood and weird gray ash matted against his skin, accompanied by a generous smattering of dark purple bruises across his ribs. What happened to you?
I was nearly killed, while saving all of creation as a matter of fact.
He replies, unfastening one of the buckles on the leather belts wrapped around his waist.
You're welcome.
You stare at your toes. After everything you've seen the last few days, you aren't even going to question that. Thanks, I guess.
Come here.
He's pointing to the ground by his feet, and you frown. What?
Come here and unfasten my boots, mortal.
What? No!
Fine.
He says, a smile on his face.
Then go wander the halls of Utgard on your own, and see how long you last. I assure you, I'll manage quite well without you.
Scowling, you drop to your knees at his feet and start yanking the ridiculous leather straps on his ridiculously complicated boots. What an ass. He'd really do it, too. He'd seriously let you die just to teach you a lesson.
Also, bending over is incredibly painful at the moment, and as you know, I do not yet have anyone else to attend to me.
He adds, patting you on the head. You glance up, softening just the slightest bit. He's been so swaggeringly confident, you'd kind of forgotten that the fact of being stabbed through the chest probably hurts like hell. The boots are finally vanquished, and you sit back on your heels, trying to ignore the fact that you're still on your knees in front of the supervillain who destroyed a good chunk of New York City. Hey, you say, trying to sound more confident than you're feeling. Because there's no good way to ask this, but you really need to know. What exactly is the relationship between you and the Queen? Your mother was someone else? His hand clenches at his side. Maybe it's a good thing that you aren't standing, because it's much easier to avoid his eyes this way.
I was raised on Asgard, under the pretense that I was the son of Odin Allfather and Frigga Allmother, brother to Thor, Odin's son.
There's a strange detachment in his voice, and it makes your skin crawl. You didn't know? You whisper.
No, I did not know. Frost giants are abhorred on Asgard, you see. I knew very little of them until after I discovered the truth of Odin's folly. I began to study all that I could. My Queen Frigga helped me. She thought that it would soothe me, I suppose. It did not.
Odin, Frigga, Thor, Loki. Hell, you're even pretty sure that you remember seeing mentions of Jotunheim in your mythology books, although it was nothing like this. Nothing could have prepared you for this. Your head is swimming. Farbauti said that the old king, Laufey, refused to take any other wives or concubines because of Loki's mother. But he clearly had, because otherwise she wouldn't be sitting there on the throne looking all conniving and smug. Which had to mean that Loki's mother was dead. And he hadn't even known her name. Your heart twists. God, that's brutal. How can he seem so calm? Despite nearly breaking your arm, that is. Loki's hand is on your head again.
I am getting in the water, and so are you. Undress.
Then his hands are on his belt, and you scramble to your feet, backing away. I am not getting naked with you. No way.
Yes, you are. It will warm you, and besides that, you currently smell like my blood and Svartalheim ash. I'd strongly prefer not to have the reminder.
But...
No arguments. If you do not undress, then I will drag you into the water clothed, and you'll have nothing dry to put on when you re-emerge.
That would kill me!
Yes, well, that is your choice, isn't it?
Squeezing your eyes closed, you fume as you wait to hear the rustle of fabric and the gentle rippling of the water.
Do hurry, mortal. We haven't got all day.
When you open your eyes, you nearly scream again, because the man watching you from the pool isn't the one who'd been carrying you around for days. No, this is definitely Loki. The guy from the news footage of the Battle of New York, pale and submerged up to his shoulders in the dark water. What the hell?
I am a shapeshifter, girl. This form is much more comfortable. My birth form is actually rather unstable.
I thought you were avoiding using magic.
Powerful magic. Interdimensional magic. This hardly qualifies.
It's the same guy. No need to freak out even more. It's just Loki. Loki is Loki. And Loki is a freaking shapeshifter.
Come in, little mortal.
He purrs, and now he's clearly trying to freak you out. He reaches for you.
The water is warm.
Crap. Your cheeks flush even more. Could you turn around? Or close your eyes?
This is absurd. I am not tempted by you, girl.
But he turns around anyway, and you let out a sharp, relieved breath. Okay, now hurry up and get in the water before he changes his mind. Your fingers are shaking. Maybe from the nerves, maybe from the cold, and you struggle to unzip your coat and pry off your boots. The room is relatively warm. Relatively. You tear off your sweater and undershirt next, and then your jeans and thick socks. Now, it's just your underwear left to go, and you stare at the back of Loki's head suspiciously, expecting him to turn around the moment you're naked. But while it isn't freezing in this steamy bathroom, it is chillier than you'd like, and so you take a deep breath and quickly slip out of your underwear and bra. It's for survival. Just pretend that it's a locker room. Yeah, a locker room in hell. There don't appear to be any actual steps anywhere, because of course that would be too convenient. So you sit on the edge of the pool and awkwardly slide into the water, crossing your arms over your chest as Loki slowly turns, alerted to your presence by your less than graceful entry. The water honestly feels so damn good that for a few seconds, you forgot to be totally mortified about the fact that you and Loki are naked in a giant hot tub under some freaky alien palace. But only for a few seconds. Sure, the water seems pretty dark, but how much can he really see? Loki's hand emerges from the water, pointing to a shelf that juts out just below one of the sconces.
Go fetch that. You're going to wash me.
I'm not.
Just do it. You are testing my patience.
You shut your mouth and flounder over to the shelf, which is kind of awkward because the bottom of the pool floor slopes and becomes deeper the further you go. By the time you reach the shelf, you're on your tiptoes. This looks like a sponge, you say, baffled. You pick it up and squeeze it. It feels like a sponge too.
That's probably because it is a sponge. The oceans of Jotunheim are more bountiful than any of the continents.
God, you hate it when you sound so snide about it. You squeeze it again. It's so surreal somehow, finding something as ordinary as a sea sponge in the middle of this weird, menacing world. Turning, you work your way back towards him. Otherwise, he'll probably just come after you, and that's a much more terrifying concept. It is kind of funny in a way, that him looking like a normal, albeit incredibly handsome man, is almost more unsettling than him being blue, because blue Loki is at least familiar. This is Loki the god. Loki, brother of Thor. Loki the supervillain. Loki, who's looking at you now like he's about to lose his temper. You pick up the pace. At least he's got the decency to stay in deeper water. Here. You brandish the sea sponge in his general direction, and he looks at you as if you just lost your mind. He raises his arms, just barely skimming them along the surface of the water.
I am in a great deal of discomfort, mortal. I'm trying to be generous enough to give you a purpose that merits all the trouble you're certain to cause me. So please do not be difficult.
Is this my life now? Am I going to spend the rest of my days giving Thor's villainous not brother sponge baths on a frost planet full of blue giants? The theory that you're having some sort of bizarre hallucinations as you freeze to death in the cave is seeming more and more likely to be true.
Consider also that were I in a mood to have my way with you right now, the short amount of distance you are trying so valiantly to maintain would do absolutely nothing to stop me.
Is that supposed to make me feel better?
Take it how you will.
Okay, fine. And honestly, once you do start scrubbing the grime and leftover blood from his skin, you also start to relax just the tiniest bit. Because Loki remains incredibly still, you do your best to pretend he's a statue. It would help if he'd stop watching you, though. You wash his chest and his back under the merciful cover of the water, trying to actually touch him as little as possible. But when you finally reach the small of his back, you hesitate. He can't possibly expect you to go any lower, can he? But you never find out what exactly Loki might have intended, because just as he turns slightly to say something to you, there's a booming knock on the heavy door. A familiar, unpleasantly cloying voice follows it. "Oh, Prince Loki!" Damn her. It's the one from before, Skadi. Loki's eyes met yours as he glances over his shoulder, a smirk tugging his lips. "No," you say, dropping into the water up to your chin. "Don't you dare."
Enter,
He shouts, and you cry out in outrage as the door begins to swing open.